Hero Quest might have been the first really popular dungeon crawl game, and I think there's a good argument to say that Gloomhaven is probably the best one ever made, but there have been some other solid titles over the decades. We're looking at this game right here. It is Castle Ravenloft. Now, it is one of 3 Dungeons & Dragons themed dungeon crawl games released in the late aughts. I really like that terminology. And pretty much everything about this game was actually pretty darn good. Let's start by taking a look at the characters. Being a fully cooperative board game, there were 5 heroes you could choose from, and each one was built around one of the standard Dungeons & Dragons classes at the time. Here you're looking at the Ranger. And there was a little bit of customization, as you had the base card right down here in kind of the bottom middle, and then you were able to select a certain number of each of the 3 different types of kind of special power-up cards you could take each scenario. And that gave you some kind of ways to make your character your own and also tailor it to whatever you needed for that particular level. One thing I do want to note, you do see as this first level down there in the corner of the hero card. There wasn't really a leveling system, sort of, but it wasn't anything like you would expect from a role-playing game. This is, once again, is a simple dungeon crawl board game. Movement in Castle Ravenloft was fairly straightforward and simple because you moved around a grid. But the board was made of these interconnecting tiles you see right here, where you have little spaces for your character to stand on, and they had to be set up certain ways based on how you drew them and making sure pathways actually made sense. And that little bone pile that you see in some of the tiles, that dictated where monsters would often spawn. When it came to combat, the basic combat was fairly straightforward, and it was D20 based. Your attacks were part of those special cards that you could choose from, and some of them were things you could use all the time, and other ones were things you could only use maybe once per game. But an attack value had a basic modifier to the die roll. You can see here it's a +6. You would roll a D20, and if the total combined of the roll and the modifier equaled or surpassed the armor class of the enemy you're attacking, the attack would succeed, and you would do a certain amount of damage based on the attack. And then monster attacks work the same way. They had a modifier to their D20 roll. You see here, for says attack +9, +7 for the wolf. And each hero had an armor class, and it was the same kind of thing. If the monster hit you, it did a certain amount of damage to your character. All right, guys, future Jason interrupting you right here. You can see my Christmas lights are already down, and I got a haircut, so I couldn't really hide this any better way. But I'm here for a quick, shameless self-promotion. The Kickstarter project for my next set of Fracture Colony miniatures is about to go live. You've probably seen me talk about this quite a bit over the past few videos, and you can find a link to that project down in the description of this video. Now, if you head over there, you can sign up to be notified when the project goes live, which, based on the current date that I'm recording this, will probably be within the next 5 days or so. All right, thanks for listening to this little interruption. Let's head back over to the classic game commentary. For the most part, the dungeons in Castle Ravenloft were randomly generated. And historically, when you head to these games that were dungeon crawls that had randomly generated boards, you would often run into the problem to, well, how do you find the final room or the encounter or whatever the last part of the quest or campaign mission would be. Because you sometimes would have like a deck of cards where you knew that at the very bottom were maybe like 3 or 4 possible end tile cards, and then when you branched off or you found a door, then that deck split, and then who knows where it ended up, then it split again, and then sometimes you'd run a situation where you got all the way to the end of a path, but in terms of the final room was way over here, and you had to walk back and all that fun stuff. It wasn't fun. But so Castle Ravenloft kind of throws that all the way out. For the most part, what you would do is you would take a certain number of tiles as dictated by a scenario, let's say 8, randomly set 8 aside face down. Then you might take 4 more, mix in whatever the final room was to those 4, and then place those 4 on top of the rest of the stack, and that first 8 would come back on the stack. And the thing is, in terms of branching the dungeon, well, there really weren't paths and doors per se. It was just basically a giant big open room. So no matter what direction you walked, you would eventually run into the final room because there wasn't any splitting of this deck of tiles. It was just, okay, once you've explored, between 9 and 12 tiles, you knew one of those was going to be the final room. It's a solution, and it worked fairly well. Now, miniatures for the game were fairly decent, as you see here. They were unpainted versions of what were available at the time for the pre-painted, randomly boosted, whatever you call those things, random pack, blind boosters, Dungeons & Dragons miniatures. And even some other products, like for example, at the time there was a game called Dungeon Command, which was like a skirmish level D&D themed competitive game. That particular game, which had pre-painted miniatures, would also give you monster cards, so you could use those figures inside Castle Ravenloft, as well as the other games similar to this one. Like most classic games, I haven't played this one in a long time, and I even forgot the year it was released. I thought it was released in the aughts. I'll be honest with you, I kind of just wanted to say the aughts. It was actually 2010, so technically it was the next decade of this millennium, but Wait, 2010 would have still been, yes, 2010 would have still been the last year of the aughts decade because the millennium started in 2001. But I'm getting off on a total random sidetrack. The reality is, this game, played it a couple times, did a review of it back in the Tabletop Battlefield days, and it was a fun game. There really isn't a whole lot wrong with it. Everything about it was pretty solid. And frankly, if you like dungeon crawl board games and you like cooperative games, it might not be a bad idea to try this game out if you've never played it. I'm looking over here at some listings online. You can find it for about $50 to $60 still online today, which is pretty darn good. I believe the retail price was around $60 back in 2010 when I got it. Even though I haven't played it in a long time, that's just kind of how life is. This is one that I am going to hold on to. I have been selling off some of my old games I never play anymore, but this one does have some fond memories, and it was a solid game, so I will hold on to it. Because, frankly, even if it's still available for $60 online, that doesn't mean people want to actually pay that kind of money for it. I may have tried to sell all my World of Warcraft miniatures recently, and even though I thought that it was a reasonable price for what I was offering, absolutely no one was interested. So anyway, that is about all I have to say on this game right here. This is Castle Ravenloft. Was this Wizards of the Coast? This was Wizards of the Coast. I always forget who made this one exactly, because the Dungeons & Dragons license for board games has got passed around over the years. But anyway, that's enough of me rambling on about this kind of thing. So thank you guys all for watching. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and I'll see you guys all next time.